Personnel will carry out the training of Ukrainian pilots on the F 16 fighter jet. The plane is the latest weapon granted to Ukraine by NATO countries to use in their fight against the Russian invasion. So, what will this training actually look like? Where will it take place? How soon will these planes be operational? What impact will have on the theater? We bring you the latest on the updates on the war in Ukraine here on Inside Sources, and really thrilled to have joining us today Missy Ryan, a reporter for the Washington Post who covers diplomacy and national security. And Missy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great piece in the Washington Post today, and just give us a little bit of the lay of the land. Break it down for us in terms of what this commitment from the United States means, and what should we be watching for as they start to execute on that.
Yeah, so the United States, for the first time, is saying that it's going to bring Ukrainian pilots to the United States and train them on flying the F-16 fighter jet. That will begin in October, the actual F-16 training at Morris Air Force Base, which is outside of Tucson, Arizona. And that is expected to take a number of months, depending on the skill of the different pilots and their experience levels. It'll include combat maneuvers, weapons use, centrifuge training, and they also will be training a number of several dozen at least maintenance personnel that will then go back and help Ukraine maintain this aircraft and keep it in the air. And all of that is taking place as the United States and its allies kind of face pressure from the Ukrainian government to speed up the training process. Earlier this year, the Ukrainian government finally got secured approval from the United States to allow the transfer of F-16s from European countries that have bought the U.S.-made fighter to give those aircraft to Ukraine. Ukraine really wants these aircraft. It's kind of struggling on the battlefield against Russia, and it thinks that F-16s will help it try to take back some Russian-held territory. So this is a move that, the United States is saying, in addition to the training that's supposed to be happening in European countries, which have a much smaller capacity, much smaller air forces, smaller F-16 fleets, we will also do the training in the United States. It's something the U.S. has done a lot of, training foreign pilots on the F-16, and it's going to potentially speed up the process.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing, and I'm glad that you kind of broke it into those two pieces. One, you have the training of the pilots, which is obviously the critical component there, but equally important is the training of the maintenance personnel. We don't often think about the back end of this. We think, oh, it'll be great. We'll train these fighter pilots. They'll be up in the skies doing this. But you don't think about the complexities of maintaining that kind of weapon and all the systems that go with that. But that's equally important. And then I also noted in your piece, you also talked about the fact that there's going to be English language training going on for these pilots and maintenance folks. Tell us about that.
Well, that'll happen first at a different base in Texas. And basically, the pilots need to have a certain level of English proficiency not to receive this instruction. And even people who do speak some English, they need to learn the right jargon and the right vocabulary in order to safely do this training, because they're going to be up in the air with trainer pilots. So that's something that the U.S. is insisting on.
Yeah, very important in this decision from President Biden, the administration, to support this, because what many people don't recognize, and you pointed this out in your piece as well, is the fact that because the United States manufactures the aircraft, we actually do have to grant permission for the transfer of these planes.
That's right. That's when the United States sells or gives big pieces of U.S.-made equipment to other countries, it often comes with these transfer restrictions that those countries are not allowed to give it or sell it on without explicit permission, which comes from the State Department. So now the Biden administration has said that they will grant that when the actual transfers are put forward, but it's kind of a bureaucratic process.
Yeah, for sure. Bureaucratic process for sure. Probably in triplicate there. Talk to us just a little bit about the kind of the process and the stages of training in terms of what does it take to take someone who may have flying experience to being able to fly an F-16 to then get into that combat mode?
Well, there's the initial pilot training that, can take up to 8 months. And this is for people who are just getting started. And then there's the specialized or upgrade training that would train somebody who's already experienced on a less sophisticated platform to fly the F-16, and that can be anywhere like 5 months. Some of that happens on the ground, and some of that happens in the air. So it is a multi-step process, and that's something that happens. A lot of that happens for U.S. pilots at Luke Air Force Base, and that is an 8-month process. But those are experienced pilots who get selected for the F-16. So it's a really sophisticated platform, and if you can imagine, you're not just dropping bombs, but you're potentially doing air-to-air combat. So that's something that they want to make sure that people are really ready before they send them back into, the kind of environment that they would be in Ukraine.
Yeah. And then just last thing on the kind of the tactical, practical side of all of this, in terms of, we talked about the maintenance of that. There's also other things like ground support, air traffic control, length of runways. What do you know about everything entailed in that part of the process?
Yeah, and that's one of the things they're going to be training the other personnel on, as air traffic controlling, what special concerns need to be going about that. I mean, like they say, there's always like a package around the aircraft, and that is, you need the personnel to be able to enable the flight. You need the personnel to be able to, repair the aircraft and to ensure that it's properly cared for. That's in addition to, getting it, once it's up in the air and keeping it aloft and employing the weapons and the capabilities in the right way. So it's a very sophisticated endeavor, and that's what the U.S. is going to be trying to speed up to the extent that that's possible to do.
Yeah, and I've also noted in a couple of other places just the idea of how do you actually protect that asset, whether it's in the air or on the ground. It's got to be protected.
That's true.
Russia will clearly know they're there, and so that becomes another level of that. So given all of that, and knowing the slow slog that the war is in right now, in terms of impact, we're still quite a ways away in terms of these F-16s really playing out in terms of advancing the Ukrainian cause on the battlefield.
That's right. I mean, it could be, we reported prior to the U.S. announcement that Ukrainian officials were somewhat in dismay, talking about it might be a year before they actually have F-16s operable in Ukraine. It's not clear whether this new training in the U.S. will accelerate that, but it'll be a while. It would be into 2024 for sure before those aircraft can be in the air. And there's different views on how whether or not it's a good idea to fly F-16s in this current environment. The Russians have a lot of capable air defenses too. So there's a lot of debate about whether or not it's the Russian Air Force is not flying a lot of. They are doing most of their strikes against Ukraine from well within Russian-controlled territory from Russia itself, or over the Black Sea.
Yeah.
And so there's a debate about how useful this will be in the current environment. But that's something that I think the Ukrainian commanders will make that decision once they have the aircraft.
Yeah. Anything else you're keeping your eye on in terms of how this all steps forward as we keep moving?
No, I mean, I think the biggest question is where will the battle be at the point where where Ukraine has the F-16s and they have the pilots ready to fly them. It could be because we're talking about a fairly significant lag time. It could be a very different battlefield than we're seeing today, which has been pretty static since last fall. But, there's also a significant possibility it'll look the same. And then the question is, how do you employ them?
Yeah. Great insight. Missy Ryan, reporter for the Washington Post, covering diplomacy and national security. Missy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Great perspective there. Again, it's a long process to get someone all the way ready, have all the maintenance, all the requirements around to make sure that an F-16 can not only do the job, but be maintained so you can do it over and over and over again. We'll step aside for a quick break, but when we come back, it's our inside look inside presidential politics. Coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
When a loved one, a part of your life, goes missing, you never give up hope.
Treehorn went missing October 2nd, 1985.
Now, a fresh lead in the case is encouraging.
Roy City Police want to know if a particular spot on a mountain might hold evidence related to the disappearance of Cherie Warren.
KSL was at Causey Reservoir with investigators as they looked and hoped for some answers. We'll have details this week as the story unfolds on KSL News Radio.
Every business deserves a great deal. That's why, for a limited time, we're launching the Mobile Made Free event. With Comcast Business Internet, new and existing customers can find out how to get one line of unlimited mobile free for a year. Yep, you heard that right. An entire year, free. It's our best internet, powered by the next generation 10G network and with 99.9% reliability, paired with the flexibility to bring your own mobile device for no extra cost. Plus, you can save even more on additional lines for anyone in your business who needs one. And a whole year of savings. Well, that adds up. Business-ready mobile service for free. Every day of every month for a whole year. Don't wait. The Mobile Made Free event is happening now. Comcast Business. Powering possibilities.
Ends September 21st, 2023. Restrictions apply. Mobile offer requires 100 megabits per second internet package and new unlimited intro mobile service. Other restrictions apply.
At Intermountain Primary Children's Hospital, we made a bold promise to build the nation's model health system for children. Join us in realizing our vision for the future of pediatric care. So together, we can expand primary children's impact and ensure every child has access to the right care at the right place at the right time. For a century, Primary Children's has kept the child first and always. Help us continue to do so for the next 100 years. To get involved, visit primarypromise.org.
Happy 62nd birthday, Granddad.
Thanks, sweetheart.
I got you this.
A mug. Oh, thank you. What does it say? Beware, if you are 60 or older, you may be at increased risk of hospitalization from RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, compared to adults younger than 60.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
At Fisher Investments, our clients know we have their backs.
How do your clients know that?
Because Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, the highest standard for a financial advisor. It means we're there for our clients and always put their interests first.
So wait, you do it because you have to?
No, we do it because it's the right thing to do. Our clients trust us with their retirement savings, and we know how important that responsibility is. So we take the time to really get to know them.
Get to know them how?
We make sure we understand their unique goals, finances, health, family, and lifestyle so we can tailor their portfolio to their specific needs. Our goal is to help them achieve a comfortable retirement.
Sounds like a big responsibility. You must make big commissions then, right?
No, we don't sell commission-based products. We have one single transparent fee that's structured so we do better when our clients do better. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you are switching to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
From Audra McDonald to Mozart, from ABBA to Frank Zappa, there's something for you at Utah Symphony and Utah Opera. Feel the grandeur of classical masterworks with a world-class orchestra. Experience adventure and romance with stunning operas and films screened with live music. Hear the best voices in the business sing pop hits. And make memories with the kids at whimsical family concerts. All shows have just gone on sale at the best prices you'll see this year. Get tickets for your favorites at usuo.org. New to the symphony and opera, performances trending now include Black Panther in Concert, Dvorak's wildly popular New World Symphony, an unforgettable collaboration with singer and actress Audra McDonald, and the heartbreaking love story La Boheme. The super low prices for these high-demand shows won't last long, so secure great seats for extraordinary live music experiences now at usuo.org.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Construction on a new crisis center for mental health emergencies is halfway finished. Second, we're just a week away from BYU's first football game of the season. Third, the pilot of a military jet did not survive when the plane crashed near San Diego. 88 degrees and sunny right now in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it's that time of week when we take a little bit of an inside look at the inside sources when it comes to presidential politics rolling into 2024. And, of course, this was a big week for presidential politics with the Republicans having their first debate in that nomination process. And when you go through a debate like that, the first thing that always happens is first you have the campaigns telling you what's going to happen at the debate. And sometimes they're setting things up for a nice one-liner. Sometimes they're setting up because someone's going to go on the attack or someone's going to have to defend. It's all about controlling expectations. So the first thing you have to be aware of in presidential politics is before the debate, there's always a debate before the debate that sets the expectations. Often that is a combination of the candidates themselves, the campaigns, the pundits, and those with politically vested interest, including a whole bunch of consultants on the outside. And so as we look at what was going to happen and then what actually did happen, and then, of course, you have the post-debate where you start with the spin room, appropriately called, where everybody claims victory. And you have the same thing. You have campaigns declaring victory. You have candidates declaring victory. You have pundits telling you who won and why. You have social media reflecting what they think happened and who they think actually won. And then you have the dollars and cents of who now is contributing. Did you get a bump in that space? And then, of course, there's the polls. And the bump in the polls, we're still kind of waiting to see some of these flash polls in terms of what really happened and if any needles really moved in the end. So as you look at all of that, you have to have a little bit of a discerning eye and a little bit of a wary eye, I would say, in terms of what was said to happen, what actually happened, and then, of course, what comes next is what matters the most in all of that. So let's break it down just a little bit in terms of what did and didn't happen. And all of this is a precursor to the first debate that will happen after Labor Day, which is when things really start to count in presidential politics. The next Republican Party debate is scheduled for September the 27th. So a little over a month from today, it will be in a very historic, a very majestic setting at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. It is an amazing setting. It's an amazing place to have a debate. There's amazing history there. And, of course, all of the candidates will try to claim the mantle for the Republicans of Ronald Reagan. And many of them try to do that even in Milwaukee. It's a long reach, but many tried to stretch for that. So let's go down the line just a little bit in terms of what happened, what went wrong, right, what went wrong, what could have been done better for these candidates. Most importantly, what comes next. So, again, if you look at the analysis going in, Ron DeSantis was a wounded candidate, was starting to lose some of his big dollar donors, saying, maybe he doesn't have it, maybe it's not quite there. So the purpose, in my view, the most important thing for Ron DeSantis in the debate was to just stop the bleeding and just right the ship and just have a moment or two where you could look presidential. So you calm the big donors down, you dispel the rumors that you're in a tailspin, and then you can move forward. And on that score, Ron DeSantis did the job. Now, if you were looking at it from an overall debate performance, he was absent for about 40 minutes of the debate, was just nowhere to be seen, didn't weigh in, was kind of disconnected. But he had some important moments. He had some very good statements and lines. He tried to get to the personal side of things, which is one area where he's been criticized heavily. So I think it was mission accomplished for Ron DeSantis in terms of just steadying the ship, moving forward. Now he can plow his way forward to September 27th. Former Vice President Mike Pence had to reintroduce himself to the country and do so in a way that distinguished himself from the former president and the former administration and show that he actually had something to say that matters to the American people. I actually think the former vice president had a very good night, was very strong, was not afraid of getting into a little bit of the rough and tumble of a debate, which is a little surprising. He tends not to do that at debates, but he's a great debater, and he showed that. And, of course, he had the opportunity to talk about the Constitution and his duty and his commitment to the Constitution. And I think the vice president accomplished his purpose, which was just to say, you know what, he's not so closely tied to the former president, and he could win over some of those in that movable middle. And so, again, I think it was a very strong presence of an adult-in-the-room conversation coming from Mike Pence. Vivek Ramaswamy, a lot of chatter, a lot of clamor around Mr. Ramaswamy. And many, if you looked at the knee-jerk reaction, said, oh, he totally won the debate. He was constantly either throwing barbs or being hit by them. But this is one of those where you have to exhale. And I realize that we live in this forever fast-forward world, and not very many people actually go back. But I can tell you, the people who have gone back and rewatched the debate, not just the highlight reels, not just the fireworks moments, but really watched it, came away with far more questions about Mr. Ramaswamy than answers or excitement. There were a number of statements in there that got glossed over in all of the theatrics and the antics and the contempt and the smugness that if you went back and actually listened, you say, ooh, yeah, did he really just say that? I'm not quite sure that's who I want behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. Now, in terms of winning social media, yep, he did it. He was basically a younger version of the former president from 2016. Dominated the stage in terms of time and attention, but I'm not sure it advanced much in terms of the grassroots that's required to actually win a nomination. Chris Christie, the talk going in for Chris Christie was, what would he do without the former president on the stage? He staked most of his campaign talking about and exposing the former president, and he didn't have that person on the stage. I actually think that's a better Chris Christie. And in terms of being a serious candidate, I think that's where he's actually much better. And I think it'll be interesting to see if his campaign says, okay, we need to shift tact a little bit and talk a little more policy, talk a little bit more accomplishments, and what it means to move forward rather than just pounding backwards in the rearview mirror at the former president. Senator Tim Scott had a very quiet night. I don't think this was a great night for Senator Scott, simply because it's not his forum. He's never going to excel on the debate stage. And part of that, I will tell you, is because he cannot stand and doesn't have time for manufactured contempt. It just doesn't ring for him. And so he has a hard time trying to have some, righteous indignation when it's not really there. So he struggled a little bit, and he's going to have to shift tactics a little bit as he moves into the next round in September in California. So it was a quiet night. He didn't make any mistakes, so it was a do-no-harm night for Tim Scott. And so he's going to have to pick up the pace and go to his strength, which is really the one-on-one, getting out there in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Nikki Haley had the strongest of nights, showed both the adult in the room and also the foreign policy chops that I think everybody's looking for in a president of the United States. She was strong. I thought her answer on abortion and the kind of conversation we need to be having, not just the woke war, not just the culture war, but a different kind of conversation about life of the mother and life of the unborn. And I thought she did that in a pretty strategic and effective way. She also called out Republicans on spending. She was the only one who acknowledged that the reason we're $32 trillion in debt is both a Republican and a Democrat problem. And that's a bonus point delivered from this guy anyway. And then finally, Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson, the two governors, many have asked why they're even on the stage. I think these are two individuals who love their country, who believe we need to change course, and are willing to invest their time and resources in an attempt to change the conversation. And that's a noble thing. I don't think either of them has a real clear path to victory, but they do have a clear path to shape the conversation and help shape who actually fills the job. Well, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news when we come back. Hour number two. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. A former teacher from Washington County serving a long prison sentence for child sex abuse is now facing new accusations in Salt Lake County. The Spectrum reports Curtis Payne was charged this week with 13 counts of child sex assault and rape. He's already serving 4 consecutive sentences of 15 years to life. Home gardeners increasingly concerned about E. coli contamination from using irrigation water. Dr. Dan Drost, a vegetable specialist for the Utah State University Extension, says running hoses to water plants can be safe if it's coming from a culinary system.
If it's coming out of your hose and it's culinary water that you're using, then that's all tested because it deals with everyone, and so the E. coli levels are almost zero.
He says most hose irrigation systems use water from home systems. That's almost entirely culinary water. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The city of Chicago says a surge in car thefts and other crime is the result of the actions of 2 automakers. ABC's Brian Clark has details on that lawsuit.
Chicago says entry-level Kias and Hyundais not having engine immobilization devices mean that lower and middle-income residents are disproportionately affected by an increase in vehicle theft. These claims were made in a lawsuit filed against the car makers Thursday. The city says Kia and Hyundai thefts have made up more than half of all reported this year in Chicago. Both car makers, in response, laid out steps they're taking to reduce the risk of theft. Brian Clark, ABC News.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 247 points on the day. The NASDAQ is up 126 points right now. And our KSL weather, it's turning back into summer. That's next. KSL News Time 2:02.
This summer, the political season heats up.
By August, it'll be time for debates. Can you believe it?
We're planning coverage of the real issues, the important stories that impact how we live.
Listen each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
It's easy to think all money managers are pretty much the same, but at Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
Different? How? You sell high-commission investment products, right?
No, Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission-based investment products.
Well, you must earn commissions on trades.
Nope, never at Fisher. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in our client's best interest. It's the highest standard of care for a financial advisor.
How do you know what's in their best interest?
We get to know our clients and then tailor a portfolio based on their goals and needs.
But you probably sneak in some hidden and layered fees.
No, we have one transparent management fee structured so we do better when our clients do better.
Wow, you really do look out for your clients.
That's because our top priority is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement. It might be why most of our clients come from other money managers. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investments and securities involve the risk of loss.
Usually, when you want to get something done to your house, it's always nice to have the kids out of the way. Well, fall is coming, and so is back to school. And when that school bell rings, you'll have the opportunity to get those floors done without all the footsteps through the day. Mike and Sterling's Flooring America has over 40 years worth of back-to-school flooring under their belt, right here in Utah. And now's a perfect time to freshen up your home, and a lot of holidays to come. Mike and Sterling's Flooring America is part of one of the largest buying groups in the nation, which gets you great pricing. And of course, a lifetime labor warranty and 12 months no interest, so you can enjoy your new flooring now and pay as time goes by. Google Mike and Sterling's Flooring America, or just drop by their beautiful showroom in Bountiful. Your options are endless. Seeing and feeling is believing. And now's the perfect time at Mike and Sterling's FlooringAmerica.com. Mike and Sterling's FlooringAmerica.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Len Thomas.
Looking at a pretty good flow right now. Good news, the crash is gone on 45th South, taking a right lane, and the slow roll up to 45th South from the South Interchange has evaporated. This is leaving a delay-free ride on up to the downtown ramps and continuing northbound I-15 or southbound for that matter in good spacing up the Ogden area. Give your savings a boost with a 5% APY on a 12-month certificate from Cyprus Credit Union. Learn more at cypruscu.com. Len Thomas in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, if we have any thunderstorms, they'll likely be over the mountains, but right now it looks like everything's getting drier and warmer, with highs climbing into the mid-90s by the middle of next week. And right now we're at 88 degrees with sunny skies at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, we can often click through the headlines very quickly. Most people can rattle off that when crafting our nation's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, our founders were constantly trying to balance the powers of government so that no one branch was able to wield power unchecked. That was part of the design, not the flaw. But the question underneath that is the important one for me today, and that is, how much does that same principle extend to we the people? What powers do we as citizens have? Where do we need checks on wielding that power for the good of the nation as a whole? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as I was going through my reads this morning, one that just jumped out and caught me by the lapels, a brilliant piece by Kevin Williamson, national correspondent for the Dispatch. We always turn to the Dispatch for some good analysis and some deeper thinking about things that really matter. And Kevin had a beautiful piece so simply labeled, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And Kevin joins us on the line now. Kevin, thanks for jumping on with us today.
Hey, my pleasure. How you doing?
This is a brilliant piece. It got me thinking in about 27 different ways. But for our listeners, give us the baseline first in terms of what do you mean when you say it's time for us to curb our enthusiasm?
Well, if you go back to the founding era and you read the actual documents and the letters, particularly I'm thinking of John Adams here, you will notice that the founders often used the word democracy in a really pejorative way. Now, they meant something slightly different from what we mean by that when they were talking about it, but they often wrote about what they called the democratic passions or democratic enthusiasms. And this was the idea that people, particularly in crowds, tend to get carried away sometimes. It's easy for demagogues to mislead people or to get them, all up in arms for one reason or another, and our government contains all sorts of really anti-democratic measures that are there to keep that kind of thing in check. And we often have trouble talking about that because from the 20th century on, we kind of trained ourselves to think of the word democracy as just meaning good things instead of just meaning majority rule. And, of course, majorities can support all sorts of terrible things. If you'd taken a poll on slavery before the Civil War, a large majority would have supported keeping it. Majorities aren't always right. And so we've got all these wonderful anti-democratic features in our Constitution and our government. I often describe the Bill of Rights as the big list of things you idiots don't get to vote on. And I think that's a useful way of thinking. I mean, we're all sort of idiots sometimes when it comes to politics. But there are some things that are settled in a constitutional system. So we're going to have freedom of speech. We're going to have freedom of religion. And if 97% of the people don't like it, well, tough. And if 99% of the people don't like it, tough. If 100% of the people don't like it, I mean, there are ways to amend the Constitution. It's very difficult to do for good reason. But, we use this kind of silly rhetoric of capital W, we the people.
Yeah.
And as though if, 50% plus one of the population want something, that makes it a good thing, and it doesn't. One of the reasons we're in such a terrible fiscal situation is because we spend too much time listening to the people who want lots of spending, low taxes, and balanced budgets.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to
have two of those things.
I want to unpack a host of these things, and one is just this whole idea. One, that the Bill of Rights really was this idea of, hey, here's a whole bunch of things that we're going to take off of the political table. No votes on this. This is done. So let's not be debating that. You also talked about the fact that often our politics now and our politicians or those in office have been focused more on being a reflection of the grievance or the current state of the people as opposed to good governing. You don't get $32 trillion in debt through conflict, which we complain about. It's collusion by trying to say, yeah, we know it's important to be responsible, but we know everybody wants free stuff.
Yeah, there are two very different ways of thinking about representative government. And the conservative way, going back to Burke, who really articulated this way back when, is that elected representatives aren't just there to be, could we call them listless vessels of the of the will of their electors? They're there to bring their intelligence, their prudence, their wisdom, their insight, their leadership to these things. And we select them for those qualities, not just to do whatever we tell them to do, whatever 50% plus one of the population wants at any given time. So there are times when leaders have to exercise leadership rather than followership.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means doing things that people don't like. So, for instance, I obsess about our budget and our fiscal situation a lot. And in the long term, the reforms that we're going to have to do to make ourselves solvent and to keep us on a more sustainable fiscal footing are going to require cuts to programs that people like and increases in taxes that people don't want to pay. Now, if you just say do what the people want and trust the wisdom of the people, you're going to end up with a disastrous financial and fiscal crisis. If you do the right thing, the people are going to be mad at you in the short term.
Yeah.
But in the long term, it's better for them if they don't have to go through some horrible economic catastrophe. But also because we're the world's biggest economy, takes down the rest of the world with us.
Yeah. I want to get to a line from your piece on the Dispatch today that is just, I think we should shout it from the rooftops and blare it across the planet. And that is, constitutionalism is a hedge against democracy, against the horrifying things that the people will do when you give them political power without checks and accountability. Dig into that for us.
Yeah. Well, democracy itself is a hedge. And I was quoting my colleague Jonah Goldberg on this, that we have elections and democratic accountability because when you give people power with no accountability and no checks on them, they eventually will just do terrible things. Mankind is a fallen creature, and they will do terrible things with unaccountable power and unchecked power. So the people are the first kind of hedge. But if you've ever been in, finance, you know that you need a hedge on your hedge sometimes.
Yeah.
And the people themselves, of course, can run out of control. We see this all the time. We should remember that a lot of the worst governments in the history of this world came to power through democratic means or through popular acclaim. And that's something worth keeping in mind, and that people often will support in large numbers, huge majority numbers sometimes, terrible policies. And so that's why you have a constitution. I mean, the great insight of our founding fathers was writing it down. The English sort of had a constitution, but it was kind of this tradition, whereas they said, look, we're literate, educated people. We're trying to put together a government for people that we hope will be literate and educated. Why don't we write this stuff down? Why don't we make it permanent, put it in a document that can be changed if there's something that really needs to be changed over time, and we've done that a number of times over the course of our history. But let's fix these rules in place. And let's tell the people, yes, you have the power to say who your representatives are going to be, to vote them out of office if they do a bad job. But you don't have absolute power. You don't have unchecked power. Nobody does. That's kind of the genius of the system that we set up. I mean, where we've gone wrong over the years is that my theory of American politics is it's easier to pay attention to one person than to 435 people. Exactly. So we all concentrate on the presidency rather than on the legislature. So in the 1700s, they thought the presidency would be sort of a brake instead of an accelerator. They thought of the president as the guy who would veto things and keep Congress from running wild. And now it's become the opposite, where we put so much of our political energy and our negative partisanship into the presidency that the presidency, even if you don't have a demagogue in the presidency, the president acts in a demagogic fashion. And that is true of presidents of both parties. It's been true for a while. It's been true really since, I guess, FDR going forward in a lot of ways. And so rather than having the president there as a brake, rather than having the Senate there as a brake, which originally is what the Senate was supposed to do, which is why senators weren't directly elected by the people, you've got everyone acting in this maximally democratic, populist fashion. And the results are what we see all around us, and they're not good. Yeah. So there's some reforms that need to be undertaken to tap the brakes on some things, to slow some things down, and to have a government that is more genuinely composed of divided and well-defined powers.
Yeah, such an important part of that process. I'm going to go just a little long here and just give me a quick answer on this. You also talked about the really interesting effect of the small dollar donations and social media as it relates to all of this. Just give me a quick snapshot of that, and we'll have you come back another day to do a deeper dive.
Yeah, often because we think of the word democratic as meaning good, and we think of participation as just being good in and of itself, we have unrealistic expectations about what things will accomplish. So when we first started getting, the technological means on the internet to have small dollar donations, everyone kind of thought that would have the effect of making political campaigns and parties more responsive to people. So it wouldn't be beholden to these few big special interests who can write a lot of checks. But in reality, what that means is the most extreme, attention-getting, idiotic thing you can do to get yourself viral for 10 minutes on social media is the most effective way to raise money. And these giant crowds of people running around on Twitter saying, okay, I'll give you $20 because you pushed my rage button, are actually less responsible than these Chamber of Commerce guys we all hated over the years and all these special interest groups that we learned to criticize over the years. Those guys have self-interest, and there are reasons to be skeptical of them. But these kind of, stampeding herds of independent thinkers are, if anything, even more destructive and irresponsible. Yeah. So social media is kind of the cultural commentary version of that. Small dollar donations is the financial version of it. But it's the same thing. It's, it's the politics of stampede.
Yeah. The stampede of independent thinkers. Brilliant. Kevin Williamson, national correspondent for The Dispatch. This is a piece everybody ought to read today called Curb Your Enthusiasm. It'll make you think and rethink about a whole host of things. And we are so grateful to have Kevin on the show. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Anytime.
Again, that's Kevin Williamson. That's worth a deep dive read for you today. Some important things to think about in terms of that, what democracy really is and why we have a constitutional republic and why we need to have those checks and balances, not just in our government, but we also need to make sure we're checking ourselves as well.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. There were enough one-liners for an entire election.
I've had enough of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT.
And the big moments are finished.
We're skating on thin ice.
The American president needs to have moral clarity.
We don't need a president who's too old. And we don't need a president who's too young.
Is anyone breaking through? Anyone speaking to you? Join the community of smart, engaged voters who come here for discussion of the big decisions. Listen to David Dejanovic at 9 and Boyd Matheson at 1 on KSL News Radio.
Hey guys, if you're a patient at another Wave clinic for ED, Revive will transfer your care for free. And for those that medically qualify, we'll give you 4 Wave treatments for free, plus a 1-month supply of ED medication when you start Wave treatment with us. Our Renaissance Wave therapy is proven, non-invasive, and far more affordable than other Wave clinics. Book your consultation today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Be advised, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa this weekend only, today through Sunday. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Be advised, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to save 40 to 80% on a hot tub and swim spa this weekend only, today through Sunday. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. 18-month interest-free financing. Our factories have demanded we sell 1,000 hot tubs and swim spas this weekend. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Huge factory incentives, factory rebates this weekend only. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. We can remove your old hot tub. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Hot tub starting at $2,999. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Free delivery of your new hot tub. Just relax and enjoy. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Friday, noon to 8 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Free admission, free parking, free delivery. Mountain America Expo Center, Sandy. Call 833-SPA-SALE or visit hottubandSwimSpaSale.com.
Do you have an IRA or 401k? It's natural to think of this as being your money, right? But remember, you still have to pay taxes when you withdraw this money in retirement. And you could be paying a lot more in taxes on these accounts than you know. A lot more. Learn the strategies that can help you reduce or eliminate your taxes in retirement. Don't miss a special edition of Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL News Radio 1027.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Often when we hear complaints about the United States of America, whether it's our healthcare system or what's going on in our cities, whatever it might be, whenever someone's complaining, it's always, why can't we be more like Sweden and Finland and Norway? Seems like a good question. They have some good things going over there, but those countries, while we often point to them as these shining examples for universal health care and education and so on, we have to look at the realities of what you're saying in that statement and the differences between Norway and the United States, or Sweden and the United States, are pretty vast. Brian Riedel, of course, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, great piece in City Journal, Why the U.S. Can't Be Nordic. And Brian, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
I always chuckle at this one. Sometimes people point to these little countries, and I'm like, well, that's like the size of the city of Ogden. It's just a little different, guys. It has to be different. So break it down for us a little bit and get to this argument. Why can't we be more like these Nordic countries?
Well, the first reason is because the progressives rely on a complete caricature of what the Nordic countries actually do. They're portrayed as these tax-the-rich utopias where everything is free, health care is free, family leave is free, benefits are free, infrastructure is free, and everything is funded by taxing the rich. First off, it's not nearly that generous in these countries. But even if you look at the taxes, virtually the entire difference between taxes between America and Scandinavia is middle-class taxes, particularly payroll taxes and value-added taxes, which are basically national sales taxes, comprise 90% of the additional tax revenues collected in Scandinavia versus the U.S. And even within income taxes, they tax the middle class at rates not even close to anything in America. In fact, within taxes, America's corporate capital gains and estate taxes are higher than Scandinavia. We tax the rich more than Scandinavia. So, especially on the tax side, it's a caricature.
So I just want to slow that down for our listeners for a second, because that's always a thing, and you pointed it out just right, that it often the perception is, oh, this is just the rich people paying their fair share and everyone else getting lots of free stuff or all of these benefits. But you have to get to that. If 90% of that difference is really being taken, the brunt of it hitting the middle class, I'm not sure there's very many people in the United States that fall into that realm that say, "Oh yeah, I'll pay a heck of a lot more in taxes so that everybody can have these benefits."
Right. I mean, if you look at these countries, the payroll tax, which is 15% in America, is 30% on average in these countries. They also have value-added taxes, which again are like national sales taxes, of about 25%. So if you really want to collect Norwegian and Swedish and Finnish tax revenues, it's not a matter of how high are you going to raise taxes on the rich. It's, do you want to double your payroll tax and create a 25% national sales tax? It's the middle class who pays.
Yeah, always the middle class that ends up taking the brunt of all of those. One of the other things you pointed out in your piece that I want to make sure we get to, you talk about the healthcare system in particular, but you also talk specifically about the changes that would have to take place with American doctors and nurses and administrators. Describe that for us.
Yeah, I mean, what American proposals in healthcare would do is basically add Norwegian and Swedish generosity to American healthcare inefficiency. So you get the worst of
worst of both.
You get
awesome.
You get all of the problems with the American system, just more of it. I mean, starting with salaries, you would have to drastically reduce salaries for doctors and nurses in order to match. You'd have to cut about 70% in doctor salaries to match what they're being paid in Scandinavia, which is just not going to happen. But on top of it, what the American proposals do is pretend that we can pay Scandinavian prices for an American health infrastructure that's a lot bigger. We have bigger hospitals. We have more technology. We have more drug research. We just have a bigger healthcare system. And so the idea that, well, let's just pay Swedish prices for our healthcare system, you can't pay Swedish prices for an American infrastructure any more than you can pay Swedish home prices for bigger American homes. So instead what you would get is the big American infrastructure, the higher salaries, the inefficiencies, but you would just make it more generous. So you would end up costing even more than what they have.
Yeah, and just imagining an American doctor, making $260,000, saying, "Okay, I'll just take a 70. That's good."
Right, exactly. That's just not going to happen. We're not going to have American doctors are not going to cut their pay to $70,000 a year. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and so as we look at some of the other components, and obviously there's been challenges in all of these Nordic countries where they've had to resuscitate the economy, coming out of different economic swings and so on, and just looking at the overall, again, kind of the utopia perspective of, if we could only be Nordic. What are some of the other things that we should be thinking about where that's just not either realistic or it's beyond not realistic? It's total fantasy land.
I think one thing to look at is that Sweden in particular started building a really big welfare state after World War II. And by the 1980s, their economy was a basket case. Salaries were collapsing. I believe real wages dropped about 10%. The economy was stagnant. It was strangled by taxes. And so what they ended up doing was cutting taxes, deregulating. They even partially privatized Social Security. They made their welfare state much less generous than it had been, and their economy has grown much faster since. So when progressives talk about mimicking Sweden, they're really talking about mimicking the Sweden of the 1970s that they rapidly got away from. Again, in these countries, their corporate taxes are lower than America. Their estate taxes are lower than America. Their capital gains taxes are lower than America. And they got there because they learned away how destructive some of those high tax rates can be.
Final thought, and I love the way you closed out your piece, that no country has built a massive welfare state on the backs of the rich. And this idea, too, I don't think any of us are myopic enough to think that the U.S. system is perfect. We know there's all kinds of flaws and bugs and things that need to be fixed. But give us some perspective in terms of how should we really look at these Nordic countries, and what's something we can actually do in terms of improving the system here at home?
I think you can make cases that the American system has a lot of inefficiencies. I think you can argue that there are certain upper income taxes that can be raised without damaging growth too much, closing loopholes, in particular, making sure corporations don't completely escape from taxes. There are things that can be done. Our healthcare system is wildly inefficient, and it has to be reformed, particularly the third-party payments that result in people not being very cost-conscious. But I think ultimately, again, the idea that we're going to create this tax-the-rich utopia is just not based in reality or the reality of Europe. That's just not how it works there.
Yeah, great perspective as always, Brian Riedel, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Brian, thanks for stopping in today. Always appreciate your great insight, giving us a chance to exhale, look at the realities, and then we can actually start marching forward. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thanks again.
Great perspective as always from Brian Riedel. And when we come back, it's been 60 years since 250,000 people marched on Washington, and Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech. We're going to break all of that down coming up next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on KSL News Radio.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour, the Lehigh Police Department speaking out about human trafficking, which has been in the spotlight because of the movie Sound of Freedom.
I think a lot of times people, will hear about these kind of things and think that kind of stuff will never happen to them, or that it's not in our community.
Sergeant David Colquhoun says they've received hundreds of reports of physical or sex abuse involving children since last year. He says the best thing people can do is be aware of the problem and report anything that seems unusual. A newly planned bus route connecting St. George to Springdale set for next summer. That's an effort to help both visitors and commuters get some relief from traffic. State Highway 9 is the only main road through town. The 4 diesel buses could move 30 riders, connecting to Zion National Park's free shuttle. Pricing and stops in between still being discussed. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Following former President Trump's appearance at the Fulton County Jail yesterday, the last of the 19 defendants in the sweeping racketeering indictment in Georgia have now turned themselves in. That brings the case to its next stage. ABC's Aaron Katersky is in Atlanta with more.
Came down to the wire for 2 defendants, Stephen Lee and Tervisan Kuti, who are 2 people that were accused of trying to strong-arm Ruby Freeman, who was a poll worker in Fulton County, and all of them have now surrendered. They've been booked, their mugshots taken, and perhaps could be due here in Fulton County Court in about 2 weeks for arraignment.
That's ABC's Aaron Katersky. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing the trading day up 247 points right now. The NASDAQ up 126 points, and the S&P 500 finishing the trading day up 29 points. And our KSL weather, it looks like August will close out warm and sunny. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
America's largest producer of gun shows, Crossroads of the West, comes to the Davis Conference Center in Layton this weekend. Check it out.
Awesome selection. Awesome, yeah, just a lot more than I expected to see.
Yeah, it's great. Crossroads of the West Gun Show this Saturday and Sunday at the Davis Conference Center in Layton from 9 to 5 on Saturday and 9 to 4 on Sunday. Your ticket is good both days.
We'll scour through, find the best bargain, come back and buy it.
The quality at this particular show is extremely high, and the prices have been very fair.
Hundreds of tables for everyone, from the once-a-year hunter to the avid collector. Crossroads features new and used guns and ammo, gun safes, reloading supplies, knives, hunting equipment, scopes, accessories, and more.
I'm going to tell my friends to come out here tomorrow. Check it out.
This Saturday and Sunday, the Crossroads of the West Gun Show. This is the big one. Now coming to the Davis Conference Center in Layton, where you can buy, sell, and trade at all Crossroads gun shows.
If they don't have it here, they don't have it.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
Do you have heart failure and often hear,
"Those stomach issues ruined your birthday"?
"You're too tired to play catch, Grandpa."
Sweetie, you haven't touched your tools since the carpal tunnel syndrome diagnosis.
If these seemingly unrelated symptoms sound familiar, talk to your cardiologist. Ask about transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy, or ATTR-CM, a rare and underdiagnosed disease that gets worse over time. Learn more at connecttoyourheart.com. That's connecttoyourheart.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Imagine how inconvenient your life would be without power. No lights, no refrigeration, no heating or cooling, and no electronics. But with a Generac home standby generator, you'll have the power when you need it most. Generac generators automatically provide backup after sensing a power outage, so your life goes on uninterrupted. Schedule a free quote today with Genco Generators, your premier Generac service dealer in Utah. Call 801-295-0872 or online at gencogenerators.net.
Smart, connected, modern. Discover life-enhancing independent living services at Trio South Ogden. They do things a little differently there because you're different. With everything you need to support your best self, you'll find that joy isn't just for the young, it's for the young of heart. Trio South Ogden's signature programs provide a unique approach to wellness that brings living well and well-being to life. To learn more, contact Trio South Ogden at 801-475-4004 or visit triosouthodden.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Len Thomas.
In Weaver County, a little bit of southbound slowing on I-15 up past 44th South just before Riverdale Road. Now, this is kind of a triangle here between I-84 where Riverdale Road goes between I-84 and it kind of makes a triangle with it, and 5150 South. Well, it's busy from westbound on Riverdale from I-84 down to where the third leg of the triangle that Riverdale is on with 1050 West. Slow for a few blocks. Then again, 1050 West is slow under I-84 to the golf course. Now I see some of the slowing is because of a crash northbound I-15. That's in Riverdale on the right shoulder. And swinging down to Utah County across northbound I-15 in, let's see, it looks like that is in Linden there. Linden, northbound in I-15 there at the Linden exit. UDOT traffic alert. Plan ahead for weekend traffic delays and lane closures on I-15 between Ogden and Marriott-Slaterville. Crews are repairing pavement on several bridges in the area through September. Len Thomas in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we could see a few lingering thunderstorms in mountain areas, but generally conditions are drying out and warming up. Our highs will rise into the lower 90s through the weekend, the mid-90s by the middle of next week. Right now, 90 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, there'll be a big celebration in our nation's capital over the weekend, marking the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, D.C. August 28th, 1963, over 250,000 people marched on Washington for civil rights. And, of course, on that day, Martin Luther King Jr. stood before the enormous crowd on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and delivered one of the most important speeches, I think, in our nation's history. Became known as the I Have a Dream speech. If you missed the program yesterday, we had a fascinating conversation about the person who was the speech writer for Dr. King, Clarence Jones, who's actually still alive. He's 92. He's really the last living survivor who was there on that day as part of that inner circle for Dr. King, and some interesting reflections. You want to go back and check out the podcast for that. We're going to continue to break that down. The first 7 paragraphs of the speech were all written by Clarence Jones. And then, of course, Dr. King then started to riff, as Clarence Jones put it, and came into something pretty magical and momentous in the process. And I can't think of anything more important to do on a day like today than to actually go through the speech. Many people know the line, the I Have a Dream segment of that speech. There's so much more to it, and there's a lot of things that we still ought to be thinking about, some things that we've done better, some things that have improved in this nation, and some things where we are still lacking in living up to the principles we profess to believe. And so on Inside Sources, we are going to begin with the beginning, part 1 of Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, August 28, 1963, 63 years ago.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
So many powerful phrases just in that first segment of Dr. King's speech 60 years ago. The fierce urgency of now, that this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. We're going to continue with Dr. Martin Luther King. Again, 60 years ago, great celebration happening in our nation's capital over this weekend to mark truly one of the extraordinary moments of oratory and really elevating the minds, the hearts, the souls of the nation. More from Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America Until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights, the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
More coming from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 60 years ago, 1963. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. That's a message for our day. We'll talk more about that and hear more of that speech coming up next on Inside Sources. Stick around.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company, building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100 or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Does your company offer health insurance to your employees? If so, how do you know if you're getting the best deal on employee benefits? Did you know that a benefit broker makes more money when you spend more? Brokers are not only incentivized to steer you to more expensive insurance plans, but the more quotes they get, the harder they have to work and the less money they make. My name is Keith with Magellan and Linden. We're a different kind of benefits broker that offers a best plan, best price guarantee. We get insurance quotes from every insurance company every year. It forces insurance companies to compete for your business and offer the best deal possible. Here's what you do. Visit shopmyplan.com. We'll get you free quotes with no strings attached. If you like what you see, let's work together, and you'll get the best plan at the best price. If your benefits broker isn't getting quotes from every insurance company every year, you're probably paying too much. So visit shopmyplan.com today to get the best deal on employee health insurance. Go to shopmyplan.com today.
If this were a Reese's TV ad, you'd be staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup. And sure, my voice is peanut buttery smooth, but still, you need to see the peanut butter cups, right? No? I can really just say Reese's and you'll go get some? Okay. Reese's. 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 Really working, actually. Reese's. Reese's. I'm on to something. Reese's. Reese's. Reese's.
Donate today with ARUP Blood Services. Give local, save local. Open 7 days a week. Donate blood or platelets at either of 2 convenient donor centers. Visit utahblood.org.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, it was 60 years ago when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial delivering his extraordinary I Have a Dream speech. And there's nothing more important and nothing more timely and timeless than the words he uttered that day. And so we're going to continue to listen to the entire speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and recognize all the lessons that it has, not only what it set in motion, but what we actually need to live up to today.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
There is a cadence to the call of freedom, and clearly Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. channeled that on that day. But that was not the end of the speech. That's the part most of us are most familiar with. But there's still more important lessons and principles as Dr. King brought it to crescendo in that ultimate cadence and call to freedom.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It was 60 years ago when Dr. Martin Luther King delivered those extraordinary words, and not just the ones we're most familiar with. There is so much depth in there. This is one of those I'll give you as something to do today, to go back and completely listen to that entire speech. So many important messages in there, and I think there is no better time than now for all of us, individually, as community, as society, to listen to Dr. King's speech with new ears, to hear it with new hearts, and to ask ourselves the question of what am I doing to make that actually happen? As Dr. King said, how can we hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope? And I love this framing that he said, with this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. We have a lot of jangling discords in our nation, a lot of sour notes that are being struck by a host of people from across the political spectrum. And it's time to get rid of and transform those jangling discords of the nation and transform that into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood and sisterhood. And again, it was 60 years ago when Dr. King delivered that speech, ironically and powerfully, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Again, the first 7 paragraphs of that speech were written by Clarence Jones, and then Dr. King took it from there. He surprisingly went verbatim for those first 7 paragraphs, and then began to get into that ultimate cadence, that call to freedom that is America, that calls us to the better nature of our angels, that calls us to live up to the principles we profess to believe. And that's worth thinking about, not just 60 years ago, but right here today. That wraps it up for us on Inside Sources on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts,